from the 500 series pedals, so modulations, delays, reverbs, all of those effects, and super fast patch switching time. So there's no delay between patch shifting. Some of our competition uses different tricks in order to have no delay. They stay in the same patch and switch scenes and switch shots. We don't have any of that. We just have super fast patch shifting. So you can change patches without a dip in the audio. And also there's the carryover for the delay. So you can have a delay spilling over into the next patch, or the tails of the delay, so that it decays naturally rather than just gets cut off when you change patches, which is important because that's quite musical when that happens. There's a dedicated bass mode in there as well for bass players. So you've got dedicated bass amplifiers, effects, distortions, compression, all sorts of bass functions in there as well, so bass players aren't left out. Now to the amplifiers use our AIRD technology, which is written on there, AIRD, you can see on the front there. That's our acronym for Augmented Impulse Response Dynamics. So if you've used an amplifier simulator recently, you may have used an impulse response, which is an impulse response is a snapshot or a filter of an amplifier, might be a microphone, an environment, and it's basically a snapshot that you take of that sound. So you can run an amplifier simulator through that filter and it will sound like that combination of amplifier and speaker. Now importantly with AIRD, Augmented Impulse Response Dynamics, with a real amplifier, these things move. Everything moves. It's music and it's current and it's sound pressure and it's all these things that are very dynamic, and they work backwards and forwards. It's not a one-way conversation. So a normal valve amplifier will have a preamp, a power amp, a speaker, and everything is in a conversation both ways, not one way, but both ways. The amount of excursion from the speaker, or the amount the speaker travels, speaks back to the power amp, and that changes that, and it's very much a two-way conversation. When you use traditional IRs, or impulse responses, it's just a one-way conversation, a filter that sound goes through. With AIRD technology, it keeps that as a dynamic flowing sound. So it's more like a real amplifier, so it feels more genuine under your fingers when you play, because it changes with the dynamics of the amplifier that you select. You can have two amplifiers at once and you can switch between them using a bunch of different dynamic switching, which is kind of fun to use. But let's have a look at the hardware first, so you can see the box that this all comes in, because that's part of the most exciting part, at least, I think, for our customers, because GT1000's been out for a while now, and GT1000 Core offers the same power in this small little box. So let's have a look at the hardware here. Firstly, you can see that the display, although smaller than the GT1000, does contain all of the detail that the GT1000 does. So we haven't made a smaller, reduced version of the display without all the same resolution and the same parameters available. So every parameter that was available on the GT1000 screen is available in the GT1000 Core screen. The 6 buttons here on the front here are reflective of the 6 buttons identically that are on the GT1000. It's just they're about a quarter of the size, but they're all the same. They're all identical, and with a couple of cool extra functions, which I'll show you in a moment. The 6 knobs below the screen here, again, identical to the GT1000, and they correspond to anything that's at the bottom of the screen there, any value. They've got a very satisfying click as you go through them, so you can feel exactly where they are. They respond to each increment, so you can feel it clicking under your fingers, and they also have a push option as well, which selects different effects, and depending on what menu you're in, they'll each select something. Down to the foot switches. Obviously, this is a compromise because the GT1000 has 2 rows of 5-foot switches, which is great, but it takes up a lot of room. So we have 3 switches here, but they can be assigned to a multitude of different functions. So obviously for this, I have it as patch up and down, these 2. The most obvious thing for me when I'm going to play through a medley in a moment. I'm going to play through a bunch of different sounds for you. But also one controller function here. So that controller pedal can be used to turn functions on and off, or effects on and off. Actually, not just one effect, but up to 16 effects, individual effects on or off, or a combination of both. Turn some things on, some things off, all with one button press. So that's just one controller we've got here, but with the ins and outs on the back and the side, we have more options for more controller ins and outs. Now, there's also the combination of the buttons. So these 2 combination brings up the tuner, guitar tuner there. If we go across, we have our polyphonic tuner as well. Look at that, perfect. Perfectly in tune, wonderful. All right, so I get back out of there by pressing these two at the same time. And what's great is the other two you can press at the same time is you can flick between memory mode and manual mode, which is often asked about from our customers. Memory mode is a whole global change. You know, when you change between patches, everything changes. But with manual mode, just have a look at this here. You can see in this particular patch we've got channel select for the two different amplifier types, distortion pedal on and off, and you can even choose a color that you want the button to come up with there. And that's got looper on and off. We've got a 38-second looper on board, so that will start and stop the looper in this particular case. If we get back out of manual mode, we're back in memory mode again. Okay, so let's move on to, one more thing I want to show you, the lock function. This is great, and this is not actually on the GT1000, but this is more because this might actually be put in a group of pedals, and you want to be careful what you touch with your foot. If you press these two buttons at the same time, it locks the knobs, so you can't accidentally change something and turn something here. You can still use the foot switches, but all the knobs are locked out, so you can't accidentally kick them and change the parameters. So, nice little handy function. Okay, let's go to the back now and have a look at the ins and outs. And we'll be able to see some things have changed from the GT1000, but we really haven't sacrificed anything. So if we can see at the back here, try and get this out of the way here. Okay, so firstly, it's upside down, is it? Yep. Let's turn that over. There we go. Okay. So firstly, unlike the GT1000, we have stereo inputs, right? On the GT1000, it just said one guitar input. We've got stereo inputs, and this is because this might well be part of your pedal board where you have other stereo pedals, and you want to keep the stereo signal path together, right? You want to keep that separate, so you can plug it in left and right there, and everything stays stereo all the way through. And internally, your signal path is all stereo as well. All right, so we also have two effects loops, 1 and 2 there, two send and returns. Now, this can be either, individual pedals you can run out to. You can run two of your favorite pedals in those effects loops and put them wherever you like in the signal chain on the GT1000 core. Or you could run a stereo pedal out, left and right and back again. Now, the next thing is you've got your main outs here. Now, what you do lose from the GT1000 is the balanced outs. We had two balanced outs. You could run separately to front of house while you run two more back to your amplifier. Well, you can actually reconfigure two of these sends here to be, those two, there we go. Those two sends to be separate outputs. So you could run two of those with speaker simulator out to the front of house PA system. Then you could run these two master ones without speaker simulation back to your amplifier. So there's lots of different configuration options in there, which is just great. So you haven't lost anything there. Now, as far as controllers go, let's take that one out. There we've got controller 2 or 3. Okay, so this is a TRS cable, and you can plug a 2-foot switch into it, like an FS7 or our FS6, and that will give you two more controllers like the controller on the front. What I've done is I'm using it as an expression pedal in. So it says expression pedal 1. So I'm using it as an expression pedal, and I've got an EV5 expression pedal here controlling some of the parameters, which we'll see working in a moment. Round to the side, and we've got some more ins and outs here. So we've got USB there, because you can run the Boss Tone Studio software along with this, which gets to some more advanced parameters. And you can save patches, the librarian patches. Some of my patches might be on there, maybe. So you can go and have a look at those and load those in. Also, you see MIDI in and out is done with the TRS cables, the 3.5mm TRS cables, like on our 200 series pedals. And we also have breakout cables to take that to normal MIDI cables as well. And one more controller input as well, so you can do another of the FS7 or FS6 to get two more controller pedals, which you can assign again to up to 16 different functions at once, or a second expression pedal, which you can plug in there. So even though you've lost a bit on the front panel, there's so much more you've gained from the side. And you can also run some of the external controllers out of other pedals into that to control that as well. So it really is made for to be incorporated into your current system. So at 32-bit, 96K, AD converters and DA converters means it gets in and out of the system as, it's high quality and high dynamic range as possible. And when it's internally processed, it's still at 32-bit floating, which means it never leaves a 32-bit environment. Okay, all right, so let's just talk about who the customer is for this. So the customers, there's different applications for this. So firstly, for pedal board customers who have it in amongst many other pedals, obviously because it's such a small form factor. What's important for that too, though, is that unlike some of our competitors, there's a very low current draw. So it's only 670 milliamps, which is important because some of our competitors can get to over 3,000 milliamps. Now this is important if you are drawing current from one power source and using lots of different pedals that need power. This doesn't draw a great amount of power for the amount of functionality and power that's in it, which is fantastic. Total amp integration. So if you want to run this with your normal amplifier, your valve amplifier that you have, you can run it in 4-cable method. If you don't know what 4-cable method is, it's a system of putting your preamp of your amplifier into the effects loop of the GT1000 core and then running back out to your power amplifier. So that way you can run things before the preamp, effects like drive pedals, things after the preamp like reverbs and delays, and you can completely manipulate what preamp you want. You can even turn off your own preamp and turn on one of the simulated preamps that's in there. You can also run, my favorite, 7-cable method. Because you have 2 effects loops in there, you can run the same system only to 2 different amplifiers and run completely in stereo. That's a lot of cables, but I guarantee you'll love it. It's a lot of fun, and your first time you run a chorus in stereo and you hear it gloriously, you never turn back. It's a wonderful thing. Okay, also, obviously, it's a great travel rig because it's tiny. You put it in your bag and take it with you, and you have all of that power in a small little form factor. Bass rig, as I spoke about earlier, complete bass effects and bass amplifiers on board. And studio. So it's just as at home on the floor being stomped on as it is on a desktop to be recorded into your favorite digital audio workstation software. And you can also reamp with it, which means you can record into it, hearing the amplifier, but it records the guitar dry, and then you can run it back into the amplifier and change the amplifier type or anything else that fits the mix of the recording that you're currently doing. Okay, I think that's all the talking. Sorry if I've talked too fast. I'm trying to slow down. So hopefully you understood some of that. What I'm going to do now, because all of this talk is fine, specs are fine, but it means nothing if it doesn't sound good. So we're going to hear something now. I'm going to play a medley of a bunch of different sounds, a bunch of my patches that I've programmed with some backing. I'll play some backing from the laptop, but you'll hear all the sounds from here. Now watch as I use the controller pedal here. I use the expression pedal for pitch shifting and lots of different functions. And yeah, I'll see you in 5 minutes' time when we've played this. hopefully you heard all that and heard all those different sounds and saw that I used the controller a fair bit for pitch changing, all sorts of different effects. I'll just show you a couple of those before we move on now. If we just go through a couple of these patches where I used the expression pedal here. So if we could just get a look at down to the expression pedal, we can see okay, so for big dive bomb effects, especially if you've got a Strat and you don't have, a whammy bar there, and a more subtler version for the bad to the bone. Okay, so you can see how those controllers worked. I used the different harmonies as well, so there was diatonic pitch shifting, so intelligent harmonies there. And because Brian May uses very complex harmonies, I actually used 2 different patches for those harmonies. So, and then on to the big riff. So you can hear how you get so many different sounds, such a huge variety of sounds. And that's not even using an amplifier. That's just the direct sounds you can get. But then, of course, you can go and integrate that into your normal full amplifier system and do some amazing things. All right, so let's move on now. That's the GT1000 core. We're going to move on to the loop stations now. So firstly, just come over a little bit here. The loop station, or the loop stations began, just for some people who don't know the history of them, back in 2001 with the original RC20. I was doing some demonstrations at the time when we first started doing that, and it was mostly designed for guitar players, I think people thought at the time. But it soon became obvious that, that loopers are available to anybody, to any customer. So we soon found that everybody was using these, from vocalists, beatboxers, buskers, obviously, people using for violin practice, woodwind and brass instruments, guitar players, bass players, DJs, anybody that could get hold of these things seemed to use them for something in a way that worked for them. So loop-based recording is more intuitive way of creating, I guess you would say, than linear-based recording. Normally, if you record something, say you're recording a song, you would start at the beginning, you would finish at the end, you'd rewind, and you'd start again from the beginning and record the next part. With looping, it's much more intuitive than that because it happens fast and it happens live. So you can do a bass line, which I'll show you in a moment. You can do parts and just build up individual parts. You can practice along with it. You can build up harmony parts, practice your timing. There are so many different ways, and there was a saying that was around at the time when we first released these, was that there are as many uses as users, because there's so many things. It's only a recorder, so it's whatever you put into it comes back out. So it's a super creative environment. So we're going to move on to the features. Obviously, with our last ones, you could always record limitless overdubs. Right, that was always something you could do. You could just keep on recording over the top, and sometimes that goes well, and sometimes not so well, depending on what happens. Maybe happy accidents are good sometimes, sometimes not so good. But they would give you unlimited overdubs. We had some built-in rhythms in some of those. So in the RC5 and the RC500, the drum machine has been greatly improved with a lot more rhythms on board. The display is completely different. So the display is now a color display. So I'm not sure if we can get a close-up of that. So you'll see as we go through the display, you can see there it's blue, but as we record, we will see how it changes. It's a great visual display, and it changes to red when we're recording, orange when we're overdubbing, green when it's playing back. So you can really see easily what mode it's in, depending on what we're doing. There's also some effects as well on board in both the units. The RC5 has a reverse function, But the RC500 has a whole bunch of effects in there, which we'll go through and I'll show you, which are a whole lot of fun. Now, having a look at the hardware inputs and outputs, these are true stereo units. So they're just as home with a mono guitar signal as they are with a backing part that you want to record in there, or a keyboard, or a turntable, or anything else that you want to run through them. I'm using a controller out here. There's a controller in the side there, and I'm using an FS7 there, and I'm going to control some different functions with the two buttons here that I can assign them, and they can be assigned to different things, which you'll see in a moment. Obviously in the back now, we've got our MIDI again, so MIDI, our TRS MIDI, which we've got on the 200 series as well. Ax, can we just flick to that back camera? Okay, so here we go. So we can see it there. We've got our TRS MIDI cables as well, so MIDI in and MIDI out, so we can synchronize it with other pedals that have a MIDI synchronized option, and we can also control it from other MIDI pedals. Right, so let's have a listen. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to play a couple of different parts. So, if we can just hear that. Right, so at the moment I'm going to use the OC5 for an octave here, see? So I turn that off. Now I've selected a rhythm on board in here, so we can have a listen to some of the drum machine rhythms. But before I press record, let's just have a listen to some of these drum machine rhythms, and I'll show you some of the things we can do with the interface here. We need to go up the other way maybe, Joe, do we? Just to show through the interface here. Okay, here we go. All right, so we can probably see if we zoom in here maybe. There we go. It's all right, zoom in there. Right, okay, let's have a look here. That's okay. All right, so you can see at the moment that's flashing. The tempo's flashing, and that's the tap tempo that I've selected already. But if we hold down this button for a moment that turns the rhythm on, we can start to see the menu for the drums. So let's have a listen. We'll turn the drums on first. Okay. Let me just turn them down a little bit so you can still hear me talk. All right, so we've got the level for the drums right there. Now if I click this, and this has got click to it, so if I click this, I can select different options. So you can see we've got reverb. If I click the button there, I can turn the reverb up. 100 reverb, or we can turn it back off again. Right, so, oh, nice. Oh, let me go back. Sorry, I've gone too far there. There we go, reverb. So let me turn the reverb up. There we go. We've got about 90 of reverb on there. Now here are different beats. I've selected groove beat 1, but there are a bunch of different beats on board in here. Well, that's too fast for that one, obviously. Simple rock beats. There's even conga beats. Rock beat there. Funk beats. Funk beat with conga. Nice. Shuffle beats. Okay, so lots of different swing. There's all sorts of different patterns in there. All right, so we'll just leave it on that simple beat for now. Let's come back out. Okay, so see how that's blue at the moment? That means that there's nothing in that memory location. But I have already stored the tempo and the fact that the drum machine will start when I'm ready to give it an input. Now I've put it on input detection at the moment, so when I press the pedal here, it's in record mode. Now what you'll notice, now it's in red mode there, that it's beating through the beats on the top squares, and the bottom squares, when I finish, will show how long the loop is. So that's counting out the BPM at the top on those top 4 squares, and the bottom squares, that's just a block at the moment, but it will show me how long the loop is once I record it. So let me just record something. It's waiting for a signal. So as soon as I start, it'll be ready to play. A bit. Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn this down a bit so you can hear me. All right. So you can see now when I just press this the main knob here, it gives me the loop level straight away, and I can adjust my loop level. That's separate from the drum machine. You hear the drum machine there separately? So let me just turn that down a bit so you can hear me. But now you'll notice in the display, the 4 squares at the top are counting out the beat, and that line along the bottom shows me where I am through my loop. It's only a 2-bar loop. It's a very fast loop, but it shows me where it starts and ends. Now, if I want to overdub over the top of that, before I do that, I'm going to use the reverse function, which is the new effect on board. And I can do that by pressing the foot switch here. I've got it connected to it. It will reverse it. I'll show you why I'm going to do that in a moment. Here we go. Now I'll put it into overdub mode, with the screen will go orange. Right. Now what I'm going to do now is reverse it back again, and what we'll have is those chords in reverse. Now, if you can imagine what you can use that for, you can do reverse solos. So right now I could leave it all in reverse, play a solo over the top, and then put it backwards, and it will go back and just have a reverse solo. We can do all sorts of crazy things with that reverse function on board. Right, so that's easily selectable by the foot switch. In the other foot switch, I can change the memory location. So I'm in memory 1 right now, but if I press it, it'll go to memory 2, memory 3, memory 4, memory 5. And so if you've got different backing parts or different pre-recorded parts in any of those phrases, and you've got up to 99 different phrases in there that you can store these into, then you can just step through them. Now, not every one of these needs to be a loop. Some can be a loop, some can be a loop called a one-shot, which means it plays from the beginning to the end and stops. So if you had the first 4 of those loops as loops in your song, but number 5 was a one-shot, it would only play to the end and then stop, and that could be the end of your song. All right, so there's lots of different ways that you can configure that. Also, the fact that these are now 32 bits, so they're super high quality recording now, so the spec on them is much higher. So we can, with the combination of 99 phrases plus 32-bit recording is huge, but it also means that the file size is quite a bit larger for the recordings. Even though it's larger, we've still got 13 hours of recording time, which is enough for a few albums of recording time. Lots and lots of recording time, right? So that's fantastic. So you've got great dynamic range with the 32-bit. You've got 99 different phrases, but you've also got 13 hours of recording time, which is a massive amount of recording time that you can use. So as well as that, USB transfer. So there's USB port in the back that you can transfer waves over to and put backing parts on there. So I just got a question coming through. Oh yes, okay. So backing parts for the looper pedals we have on Boss Tone Central. That's important as well. Okay, so there are a bunch of different backing parts on there that you can load in there. Now, wave files you can load in via USB into this. So if you actually do a pre-recorded backing part on your DAW software on something else, you can import it in there, or you can import in other loops that you like. You can bring those in and have those within one of the 99 phrases. So Boss Tone Central, you can go on there and get some of the looper backings as well. All right, so there's RC5. Let's move on to RC500. Now, very similar, only more of the same thing. So I'm going to use this same controller foot switch here, and I'm just going to put it over here. Let's move it here. There we go. Okay, so my same controller pedal that I was using before. So the RC500, where it differs from the RC5, still 32-bit, 13 hours of recording time, 99 phrases. Many of those specs are similar. But you've also got in the back If we can have a look in the back there, Joe. Check out here. And we can see that we have a dedicated mic in. So mic in with phantom power there. Stereo in again and stereo out. MIDI in and MIDI out via the TRS. And USB, mini USB there so that you can load in, again, load in backing parts and load in loops and everything else. So in this, you've also got, on the front panel, we can see we have 2 faders. Right? So we've got the 2 faders for the levels of the 2 individual tracks. So instead of just recording over the top all the time, we can actually flick between 2 different tracks and overdub over those 2 different tracks. Okay, so as well as that, we have the reverse function that I just showed you on the RC5, but there are so many more effects in here, some really interesting effects which we can do some crazy things with. Some extra added drum functions, so as well as there's 57 drum beats, but also 16 different drum kits. There's 7 in the RC5, but 16 different kits. So on each one of those drum beats, you can also select a different drum kit. So you could have a rock beat with a jazz drum kit, or either way, different ways around. So let me just record something here. If I just get my bass part going again with my OC5. Okay, so I'm going to record, again, I've set up a rhythm beforehand, and I've got a tempo that I know. So if I press record there, it's going to wait for me again. You can see the 4 dots counting out the tempo, so I can see visually the tempo there as well, which is very powerful to be able to see that. And as soon as I start, it will start recording. Here we go. Now what you'll hear is you'll hear me turn an effect on and off. Have a listen for the vinyl flick effect. Here we go. Right, now I'm going to flick to track 2. Which one of the foot switches here. So now we have 3 foot switches on board. Now these can be assigned to different functions. At the moment they're on record, play, stop and track select, but they can be assigned to different things. Okay, so let me just record the second part here. There we go, and, oh, sorry, we've got to start track 1. Let's start track 1 first. Here we go, and, what did I do? Okay, so you could hear the effect that I was running there, the vinyl effect there as it slowed down. So there's a whole bunch of those effects. Now, I didn't record that effect. I was just using it in play mode. But if I have that in overdub mode and I press that, it will record that effect. So you could use that live or pre-record it in one of your loops. So let's just go and have a listen to some of those different effects in there. So I press memory here, which shows me things that are just about this particular memory. And I can go to loop effects here. And then we can have a look at them. So that was vinyl flick, right? The one that sounds like the vinyl record slowing down, that was vinyl flick. But there are a whole bunch of different effects here. So let's have a listen to a couple of the others. Okay, so here's repeat. So let's play our tracks again. So you can hear how you can be really interactive with that and bring in some variations of what you're playing. You can record those. You can pull back the recordings live, so I can undo any of those. Now, if I want to just erase the last recording I did, I can just hold the record play foot switch down for 2 seconds, and it will erase that last one I recorded. Oh, there it is back. So you can just redo and undo tracks, bring them in, play another track, then erase that. You can do some harmonies over the top and just keep on building it up. Of course, you can use these in a live band scenario because you can also decide what comes out of the left and right output. So you can assign different tracks to different outputs. So they're even called in the back A and B. You can track 1 could go to output A, track 2 could go to output B. If you wanted to run a click track out to output A to the drummer, so he's playing along with a loop, you could do that. And the right hand going to front of house with some backings going on. So you can completely incorporate that in a live band scenario, as well as solo, busking, DJ. There's a whole bunch of different scenarios that this could play out for. Mic level as well on the front. You can see you've got a mic level that's separate from the others. And like I said before, it has phantom power. So you can change the what type of microphone you're using on the input. You can set up all of this in advance like I did like that, or just change it on the fly. And that's the idea of looping. A lot of that is changing things as you go. But certainly those effects now make it a very powerful machine. So before we move on, let's just have a look at the full range of effects. We have a PowerPoint here, full range of the loop stations, which we can see. Yes, so firstly, we just need to close off on the multi-effects range as well. Sorry, I didn't do that before. So as well as the GT1000 core, obviously we have in the low end, we have the GT1, which has the GT100 generation of amps and effects on board. But that is super powerful, the GT1, because it's so light. That's a plastic chassis, a hard plastic chassis. So it's a super light and super portable multi-effects at a very affordable price. Again, with similar foot switches to the GT1000 core, in that it has patch up, patch down, and a control pedal there, and an expression pedal built in. And the ME80. So the MEs have been around for as long as the GTs, and this is no exception. This ME has gone through many different models. This is a solid metal chassis. You know, it's meant to be stomped on that beast. It's very solid and great for like a real gigging machine with a lot of different pedals and amplifiers on board. So that's the next level up. And then we go right up to the GT1000 core, GT1000, our full flagship, and that again is a full metal chassis and a very, very sturdy beast, just like the GT1000 in a larger form factor. All right, so let's go on to the loop lineup. Right, so there we have the RC1 at the low end. Now what's great about the RC1, it's just one loop, super simple. Again, stereo in and stereo out. But that circle on the front that says loop, just like the blocks and the line that comes up on the color display on the RC5 and RC500, the loop there fills up as it goes around and it finishes the loop. The circle completes as it finishes the loop. So very similar in a visual sort of way to the newer pedals. And then we go above the RC500 to the RC300, which is a fully fledged recorder with multiple outs, and you can synchronize different loops in different ways. So that's a huge step up from the RC500, although the RC500 now with so many functions is really, really catching up. All right, so let's move on. I've got two things left to go through. Quickly, the RC5, which I've been using so far tonight. So the RC5 continues on a long legacy of octavers over the years, from the original OC2 that was released in 1982, which I'm sure you've come across at different times. It was a favourite of bass players. And then when we updated it to be the OC3 and we improved it, some of the improvements bass players in particular didn't like. They liked some of the things that, which is sometimes happens, right? You bring out some new things and people like the old things. So with the OC5, we've brought some of the features that were in the OC2, and actually some of the limitations, strangely enough, some of the limitations is what they like the sound of, especially bass players, as I said. Also for acoustic guitar players that are doing solo gigs, and I'll show you why. So if we can just zoom in on this, I think you might have to do this, Joe, because I don't think we're going to get close enough with that. I think we might do this one. Yeah. Okay, can we see that? Yeah, that's a bit better. Okay. So the original OC2, you had one octave down and two octaves down. And quite often it would glitch when you would play, so it was only monophonic. If you dared try to play more than one note, it would have a wobbling effect where it was dance around the note and try and hold on to the note, but sound kind of strange. So that was the effect that many bass players liked. So we've put that back in to the OC5 with this vintage switch right down here. Can we see that? There we go. Okay, so let's put it over to vintage mode there. And you can decide on the back here whether it's guitar or bass in, right there. Right, I've got it on guitar in, but you can decide what frequency it needs to detect. And in the vintage mode, direct level, octave up, one octave down, and two octaves down. Okay, so, but with all the wonderful glitching that came on the first one. So if we can hear that, oh, where are we? Let me just turn the direct level off so you can just hear the octave. Now if I play a chord or two notes at one time, it's glitching, it's trying to hold on to the note, and that can be desirable with bass players. And you've got the octave up there as well you can run, so I'm running an octave down and two octaves down. If we just run the octave up and both the other ones. My original signal as well. All right, so that's a lot of those features that people loved about the original OC2. Now if we flick it into poly mode, which is the improved mode, so we can do complete polyphonic pitch shifting, which means play chords, play anything, and it'll completely track you naturally with the octave up or the octave down. So we've got one octave up and one octave down with this. So it tracks the full chord perfectly. Now what's great is, if I turn the range knob up, you can hear everything ring out, all of the notes. So that's with the range knob turned all the way to the right there. may not always want that, especially if you're playing maybe acoustic guitar into it. You might just want the low bass note to come through, right? So with that in mind, if you turn the range knob right down, the lowest note here, to the thing called the lowest setting, it just says lowest there. There it is. It will just track the bottom note on any chord you play. If I turn that down, I'll just hear that. So it doesn't muddy up the rest of the chord you might be playing, especially on something like a solo acoustic guitar player. When you're playing a lot of different chords, you don't want it across the whole range of notes because it will make it quite muddy. So that gives us just a nice clarity, but a nice boost in the bottom end. Right? So everything that you liked about the OC2 is still there, and now we've got all the new functions that were in the OC3 as well. And also that range knob comes down to just track the lowest note, which is great. So do we have, I think we're going to do questions. I think we've got some questions. Yes. Okay. So we'll come back to that. We're going to do some question times in a moment, and we'll go through all of those. I think that's probably the best way to do that, because I think we've got a few questions there. So let's just finish up on something which is not new, but wonderful. The katana range. So katanas have been a wonderful success. I don't think it's any secret to anybody now that katanas dominate the planet as far as guitar amps go. I've got a Katana 100 Mark II here. What's great about katanas is that usually modeling amps of any sort, and while this is not really a modeling amp, it does use software to get the drive and effects that are in it. Usually a modeling amp is at the mercy of software. So whoever has the best algorithm or the best software wins the day, and that's usually open to opinion, right? So different people have different opinion about how people's software sounds. What's super important, we'll go through some of the specs in a moment, but what's really important about the katanas is it's as much about the hardware and the power amplifier and the speaker as the software that runs it. And that's really what separates the katanas from any other amp that is software driven. Within this, they've used a push-pull, Class AB power amp, push-pull power amp, right? So it's like an analog power amp and speaker. Often amps that are software-driven will use a D-class amp or a digital amplifier, which is fine at low volumes. They all sound fine at low volumes, no problem. But when you turn them up, Class D amplifiers don't sound quite as good to a guitar player as analog power amps. So analog power amp, very important. As you turn these up, they have all of the juiciness and push of a real guitar amp rather than a modeling amp. So it's a very important differentiation before we go into the specs of why katanas sound better and why they are ruling the day at the moment. They are very, very popular. So the other part with katanas is, although they have a lot of technology in them, we have our tube logic technology, we have lots of different effects, we have different power amp settings in here. Regardless of all that, we just have some basic knob configurations on the top. So you don't have to use any of that technology. You can just, like a normal guitar amplifier, adjust the gain, volume, bass, middle, treble. Then you've got your multi-effects. You've got a boost, modulation effects, so you've got concentric pots there, so you've got the outside and inside. Effects, so multi-effects that are already in there, but if you plug this in via USB to Boss Tone Studio, you can select a whole bunch of different effects to be in there. So if you want this to be more complicated, it can be, but what's great is you can just plug it in and use it like a normal guitar amplifier. There's no menu. It's not menu driven, it's knob driven, just like a real guitar amplifier is. Very important. So power amp presence, we've got 4 different tone settings there we're saving. Now, that's just a recall of whatever you've set the panel at. 5 different amplifiers, really basic. Variations of classic British and American cleanish, and that's it. Each with a variation, so you've actually got sort of 10 different amplifiers. But you can control so much of this in software, but you don't have to. That's super important of how this really models a real amplifier, as in it treats you in the interface just like a guitar player. We have different cab resonance as well as different power controls. So obviously an amplifier sounds different if it's loud than when it's soft. So the idea is by bringing the wattage down, you can still have the sound of it cranked really loud, which changes the compression and the sound of the amplifier and the feel of the amplifier, but you can have it at a volume that's not ruining your hearing. That's super important. Also with the GAFC foot switch, we can control a bunch of different functions in here, turning multi-effects on and off, channel changing. There's even a wah in there, so you can plug an EV5 expression pedal and have a wah or volume control. There's so much in these amplifiers. My favorite part is that they have a way to run stereo. Again, I said that earlier, I love everything in stereo. It's such a great thing when you hear guitars in stereo. So if you get a chance, plug 2 katanas in and turn on the modulation effects in stereo. So there's a stereo link in the back. You go out of one and into another one, into the power amp in of the other one, and then you have stereo, a stereo rig, a very simple stereo rig that you can control from just one amplifier. Reverb, delay, multi-effects, so many different effects, up to 60 different effects you can load in via Boss Tone Studio, but you don't have to. You can just turn it on and turn it up and run it like an amplifier. And it gets louder than a drummer. That's very important. Louder than a drummer. That's what we're all after. Be louder than the drummer. So the full range of katanas. We have Katana 50, Katana 100. This one, there's a Katana 100 212, so 212 version of the Katana 100. We have the Katana Artist, which is very similar in spec to the 100, but has a different speaker. It has the speaker from our Wazacraft amplifiers, which is an amazing speaker. So that does make a difference. And the control panel's on the front. So it looks a little different, but the specs are very similar to this, but a great sounding speaker on board in the Katana Artist. Then on the small end, we have the Katana Air, which has the wireless control and Bluetooth, and the Katana Mini, the tiny little one you can have on your desktop and annoy the person sitting next to you. That's important. Okay, let's have a look. I think that's what we've covered there. Let's have a look at some questions. So question time. What do we have here? Let's have a look. Can we still do live recording while playing in a band? Absolutely you can, because you can tap the tempo. So you can use a control switch to tap the tempo that the drummer's playing, because sometimes drummers don't always play at the same tempo they did before. Does happen all the time. So you can tap the tempo in with a foot switch and start the loop, play one part and then finish the loop and just keep on playing. You could even send one of the outputs to the drummer's headphones so he can hear you playing along and make sure he stays in sync with you. So absolutely you can incorporate any of the loop stations into a live band environment, definitely. Okay, other questions? Questions tab. Axel, could you bring up the questions tab there at the bottom there, the Q&A? Yep, that's what I can't see. Right. Okay, in terms of performance and based on guitarist needs in general, does the GT1000 core meet the needs of the old GT1000? Absolutely yes. As you heard, everything that's available in the GT1000 other than the controllers is in the GT1000 core. If you want an all-in-one foot switch, you want all the controllers, you want an expression pedal, and that's your one solution to almost everything, the GT1000 is a great option. If you have a pedal board and a whole bunch of different pedals that you want to incorporate this in with, but you still want all of those multi-effects, GT1000 core. So same, not which one, it's just the application. There's no difference in power, sound quality, DSP, all the same. Right, so that's the same. Do we have any other questions? Any other questions? I can't see. No open questions. Okay. Do we have any others? Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. That's okay. All right, I'll hand back to Peter now. Thank you so much for your attention, guys. I hope you got something out of that. I'm sorry if I talked too fast. I apologize. We had a lot of information to get through, so I hope you could still understand some things. At least you could hear the playing, right? You could hear how good they sound and how inspiring they are to work with. So thank you very much, Peter.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh. Thank you for your time, everyone. I believe you've got my email address, so if you have any further questions, please feel free to ask. Please email me, or if you are a dealer, please also ask your distributors. Okay, well, thank you again for your time today. We are having still third wave of COVID-19 in Japan, unfortunately. So I hope everybody will stay safe and everybody will enjoy music. Okay, thank you very much and see you soon.